Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one, we're going over some players that I would be looking to trade for ahead of Week 8. We are halfway through the fantasy football regular season. So, 7 weeks in, we got 7 weeks left in most of our regular seasons. We've learned a lot so far this season. There's a lot that we can sort of take with us going forward. Obviously, trading is going to be super roster dependent, super just situation and the standings dependent. Obviously, if you're 6-1, you could afford to take on a little bit more risk in terms of like injured players. If you're 1-6, you really want to start trying. Like, you can't be holding a guy like Mike Evans at this point if you're 1-6. Things like that. Like, you're in win now mode versus really prepping for the playoffs. So keep all that stuff in mind when I go through these guys. These guys are in general are just guys that I think are really set up to perform at a really high level over the next, at least back half of the regular season. Guys that I do think can be really significant difference makers for us going forward. So, as always, if you guys do have any specific trade questions, just let me know in the comments. I love helping you guys out there. Yeah, just before I ramble too long, let's just get into it here. It's always tough to come up with a quarterback buy low or a sell high, but for me, there's one buy low candidate at the quarterback position this week, and that's going to be CJ Stroud, who's obviously been a little bit disappointing so far, but we know what the talent level is. We know what this offense can be, and I think there's a lot of reasons that we can sort of excuse the performances he's had lately. Obviously, this last week against the Green Bay Packers, not good at all. Had 86 passing yards, 10 of 21 through the air. Really, just in general, a really horrendous performance from C.J. Stroud. But Tank Dell dropped a touchdown pass, so Stroud should have just alone there had a much better day. Um, He's missing Nico Collins. That's obviously huge. He is the wide receiver one for this team, so that's going to make a very significant difference in terms of just what this offense can do without him. And then, the Packers, they're actually a relatively tough matchup. They've been able to really shut some teams down, especially at home lately. So I think we might sort of need to be looking at the Packers as a different level of matchup anyway. The schedule also softens up quite a bit here going forward. They get the Colts, the Jets, the Lions, and the Cowboys over the next month. Of those four teams, only the Jets scare you a little bit, and we just saw the Jets on Sunday night. They do not seem to be the same level of defense that they were earlier on in the season. I certainly think that C.J. Stroud's going to be able to take advantage of that, especially given that he should get Nico Collins back in the next 2 weeks here, so that's obviously super exciting. And also the playoff schedule, not bad at all. You get the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens. Three teams that should be able to put up a lot of points on them. That Chiefs game, obviously not super exciting. It'll be a really fun game from an NFL standpoint, but the Chiefs have really been sort of keeping scoring low lately. But the Dolphins and Ravens should be able to put up a lot of points. That should easily be a shootout setup. And I really do view Stroud as a really solid quarterback one the rest of the way, and I just don't think he'll really cost you that. Managers are pretty frustrated. I think he's sort of viewed as like a streaming option at this point. So I would be looking to kick the tires on Stroud if you don't have like a locked-in QB1 right now. Moving into the running back buy lows here, we've actually got three this week. Normally I do about two of each position, but there were three running backs I really did want to talk about. And I'm going to start things off with Rachaad White, which I know might seem a little bit surprising to some of you guys. He's obviously not looked fantastic so far this season and has been one of the larger disappointments so far through the year. But he's coming off a big game here against Baltimore. Obviously, pretty much all of it came in garbage time. Had, I believe, 6 catches for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. So most of his production coming through the air, and that shouldn't surprise any of us. He's a guy who has historically been relatively inefficient on the ground, but has been a really talented pass catcher and is a guy that this team needs to perform at a high level, especially with the losses of Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Evans going to miss at least the next 3 weeks. Chris Godwin going to be out for the rest of the season. Rachaad White immediately becomes potentially the number one target in this offense. I mean, Jalen McMillan will have to step up. Cade Otton will be involved. You'll see Sterling Shepard. They'll get other guys involved, obviously, but Rachaad White's like the most proven pass catcher this offense has to offer, and the defense, not great. They're going to give up a lot of points. They've got what should be a pretty high-scoring matchup against the Falcons in Week 8 here. I mean, this is just going to be a team in Tampa Bay that's going to be playing from behind, likely without these stars. You're going to see a lot of passing game usage for Rachaad White, and that was the recipe for him being super relevant last season. He was a top 10 running back in fantasy last year, and he did that while being extremely inefficient on the ground. So I don't really care a whole lot if Bucky Irving comes in and gets 10 carries, takes those away from Rachaad White, because Rachaad White wasn't really doing a lot with those anyway. What we're looking for is for him to be getting the high value touches, the receiving work, the garbage time that this team's going to find itself in quite a bit now going forward. And then also, you're going to look at a situation here where Rachaad White should potentially still be the goal line back. We'll see what happens with that. But even without it, Rachaad White should get a ton of work, ton of volume in the receiving game, and I think he can be a fringe top 15 guy the rest of the way, at least until Evans comes back. Next buy low candidate here for me is going to be Devon Achane. Really, it's just all about this Dolphins offense and the return of Tua in Week 8. The entire Dolphins offense should do effectively a 180 at this point. They were really good for the first couple of weeks with Tua out there, and they were absolutely horrendous without him. And that's just how it's going to be. You see the importance of these high-end quarterbacks in the NFL, and we really did see that, especially in Miami this year. But over the first 2 weeks, Devon Achane was a top three running back in fantasy. There's really no reason to expect that to not happen the rest of the way here. The Dolphins are already through their bye week, which is fantastic. It's something that we do want to keep in mind when we're trading for players right now. If you can sort of steal a week, trade for a player that's through his bye week, and trade away someone who hasn't had one yet, it's a good way to buy yourself an extra week there. The schedule going forward is absolutely fantastic. You get matchups against the Cardinals, Bills, Rams, Raiders, and Patriots over the next 5 weeks. That is by far the easiest schedule for running backs over the next 5 weeks. And then even after that, Packers, Jets, Texans, Niners, Browns. Doesn't really scare you there. I think Devon Achane's in line for a lot of work. The offense is going to be extremely efficient going forward. I mean, there's no reason they shouldn't be. Tyreek and Jalen Waddle will be reborn here as well. And I think if I were to tell you that Devon Achane ends up being a top three running back the rest of the season, nobody would be shocked by that. And we need to be getting players with this kind of upside on our roster. You're not going to win your league without at least one player sort of going nuclear over the stretch. Devon Achane gives you the kind of ceiling you need to win your league, and he's the kind of guy that I want on my roster and not on other people's. So I think he's definitely a guy worth trading for. I traded Brian Thomas for him last week. Obviously, you're gonna have to trade a lot. Like Devon Achane's not a guy you're getting for free there, but like Brian Thomas, if you've got a lot of receivers, I think that's fair value. There's lots of sort of things you can do there, and I do think Devon Achane's going to be a difference maker the rest of the way. And the last running back I'll talk about here is a buy low candidate. It's going to be J.K. Dobbins, who obviously underwhelmed last week, but the usage is still there. He had a 68% snap share compared to 73, 71, and 65% the previous 3 games. So right in there, nothing really changed there for Dobbins. Still had 17 touches, 14 carries, 3 receptions. That's fantastic. There's nothing to be concerned about there from a usage standpoint. And this was a game where they were actually trailing most of the game, and you still saw that J.K. Dobbins was on the field a ton. That's great to see. Going to be a touchdown dependent kind of guy. It's great to see the catches. The receptions sort of give him a little bit of a higher floor, but this is a guy that you're going to want to see touchdowns for him to build up like those high end weeks. But he is already through his bye week again, another plus for him going forward. And they've got an absolutely fantastic matchup for us in week 8. They play the Saints. Remember what Tampa Bay and Denver have done the last 2 weeks? We saw Sean Tucker have a 200-yard game against them. Javonte Williams looked like rookie year Javonte Williams last week. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to go out there and have an absolutely monster performance this week, and I do fully expect this Chargers offense to trend up the rest of the way here. They're getting more comfortable in a new system. We got to remember this is an entirely new coaching staff here. They've got young receivers in Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston. This is a team that should get better and better over the course of the season, and if you need running back depth, I don't think Dobbins is all that expensive right now. I had one league I had Trey McBride and Evan Ingram. I was able to get Ingram on waivers at one point. So I traded Trey McBride for J.K. Dobbins, and you guys know how much I love Trey McBride, but I really do think J.K. Dobbins is going to be a difference maker the rest of the way, and I think that that's a fair price to pay, and obviously it's a trade that you can get done right now. Next up, I'm going to do it again here. I'm going to bring up Chris Olave. It's the second week in a row I've got to bring him up, but just wanted to remind you guys of the plan here. I mentioned last week that you were looking at probably 2 more bad weeks, so that was going to be last week, and then this week we're not going to get a lot of production. Honestly, Chris Olave is not even a lock to clear concussion protocol this week against the Chargers, and that's okay if he doesn't. You're not going to be super stoked about playing him this week against with Spencer Rattler at quarterback anyway, so I don't need even if you're trading for him, he's not a guy that I'm excited about this week, but after that, you're going to get Derek Carr back, and the schedule softens up so much. I think Chris Olave could absolutely go on a tear the back half of the season. You're going to get Carolina, Atlanta, Cleveland, the Rams, the Giants, the Commanders, the Packers, and the Raiders the rest of the season. That's like all top half matchups. Chris Olave could certainly be a top 10 wide receiver the rest of the way. He's got the talent. We know that. It just hasn't really come all together for him, but he's an elite talent. We know that. The defense is bad. He'll have his quarterback back. Rashid Shaheed is gone, and honestly, that's kind of great for Chris Olave because for whatever reason, Derek Carr liked throwing the deep ball to Shaheed more than Chris Olave. Chris Olave can certainly run those routes and is certainly a deep threat himself. So we will see Chris Olave get those deep passes as well. Chris Olave is going to be a difference maker the rest of the way. And if you're 4-3 or better, I think he's absolutely a guy that I want to get on my roster because he can certainly help take you over the top. And even if you're in a bad spot, if you're 2-5, right now. If you're 3-4, I don't want to give up Chris Olave because I think after this week things are going to be fantastic for him, and I think if you can just weather the storm one more week, I think Chris Olave is going to be a big difference maker for us the rest of the way. Next, we got one more wide receiver to talk about here, and it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. And obviously, this one shouldn't come as much of a surprise. It's not exactly a controversial name here, but I really do think the Cowboys are set up to effectively repeat what they did last season, where they were relatively mediocre on offense through the first half-ish of the year. Then they had their bye, and they came out, and CeeDee was the wide receiver one the rest of the way. Dak was the quarterback one. I think this is a team that the schedule really does soften up here. They got games against the Niners, the Falcons, the Eagles, the Texans, the Commanders, the Giants, the Bengals, the Panthers, the Bucks, and the Eagles to close out the season. That's a lot of shootouts coming up here. It's a lot of bad defenses and good offenses. I think CeeDee and this offense are going to really turn things around at this point. They had the bye week to sort of lick their wounds, gather themselves. They're not going to be able to run the ball very effectively, and that's great because they're going to need to lean on Dak and CeeDee. We've seen them do it before. They can absolutely do it again, and I think that honestly, if you made me bet which receiver is going to be the wide receiver one the rest of the season, I know we haven't really seen it right now, but I think CeeDee Lamb is at least really close in terms of where I would place that bet on. So CeeDee's obviously an elite talent. He could easily be the wide receiver one the rest of the way, and I don't think he's going to cost you that right now. So he's certainly somebody that I at least want to kick the tires on to see how expensive he's going to be. And lastly, I always want to get one tight end for you guys in here. I'm going to highlight Dalton Kincaid, who I really do think is potentially turning a corner here. I know we didn't see a lot of production week 7, and obviously that's a little bit frustrating. He's been a bit of a disappointment so far. I believe he's the tight end 12 on the year in half PPR, so not what you drafted at all. But I think the Bills might have finally sort of gotten their passing game rolling this last week. The first half of the game, Josh Allen was like 5 for 13 through the air again, was not performing at a high level at all. And then it seemed like something clicked when Amari Cooper caught that passing touchdown. We saw Keon Coleman open things up. He had 125 receiving yards. We saw Josh Allen go over 300 yards for the first time this season. And it should only get better and better as this team integrates Amari Cooper more and more. This is going to be a Bills offense. Like we know, Josh Allen's a guy that can throw for 5,000 yards over the course of a season. This is a team that can be a really high-octane passing offense. And I think the addition of Amari Cooper and them just sort of getting more comfortable with what they're doing this season is going to really open up just the high-level ceiling of this Bills offense. And Dalton Kincaid's only got one touchdown so far. If this offense improves significantly, that touchdown regression should allow him to perform a little bit better in that regard. I bet he finishes the season with somewhere around 5 or 6 touchdowns, which is obviously not a ton, but that means he's getting 4 to 5 touchdowns over the next 10 games. That's a lot more than the 1 in 7 weeks, so that should improve over the course of the rest of the way. This schedule for them, absolutely fantastic as well. They get games against the Seahawks, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Chiefs, the 49ers, the Rams, and the Lions over the next 7 games. I think we're looking at a 7-game stretch there of the Bills putting up a lot of points, needing to throw the ball quite a bit. These are teams that can score on them, and that's great because that's going to put them in a spot where you'll need Dalton Kincaid and this offense to put up a lot of points. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this Bills offense going forward. And I think the other thing to remember with Kincaid is he's still a second-year tight end. It's often just really tough for young tight ends to be elite. They sort of peak later in their careers than typical wide receivers and running backs, and I just don't think he's there yet where he's ready to be a number one target in an offense. But adding Amari Cooper takes away the primary coverages from him, so he's not going to be the focal point of defenses. It's going to open things up for Dalton Kincaid to get open in the middle of the field, and this team might be willing to throw the ball a little bit more than they were over the first 6 weeks of the season because they have Keon Coleman leveling up potentially, Amari Cooper coming in and elevating this offense. We could see this team be a little bit more pass happy than they were over the first 6 weeks, and I think Dalton Kincaid could be a very real benefactor of that. So that'll do it for some buy low candidates this week. Up next, I'll go over 5 players that I'd be looking to sell high on, so that video will also come out today. Highly recommend you guys watch that one as well. After that, I'll be going over starts and sits, so I will cover every single matchup this week, go over which players I think should and shouldn't be in your lineups. We have no players on buy this week, so we've got 8 games in the first video, 8 games in the second video. I always split those starts and sits into 2 videos, just so that it's not like an hour-long video. I don't want to make you guys watch all that, and that way I can also record the second one a day later, have a little bit more practice report information. So stay tuned for that. Sunday morning, I'll go over my live stream, so I'll just be going over last-minute starts and sits, last-minute injury updates. Any questions you guys have, I'll answer them live for you guys there, and hopefully we can see you there. It's always a lot of fun getting things ready to roll right before the games kick off. That's 1 hour before the early morning games, so 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. Hope to see you there. If you guys haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. That way you guys don't miss any of this future content. Videos like this, along with waiver videos, weekly recaps, starts and sits, live streams happen every single week, so I'll be here all year long to help you guys win your leagues. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you don't miss anything when it comes out. And then if you made it this far in the video, hopefully you liked it. So if you did, just give it a thumbs up. It helps me out quite a bit. Appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't.
If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.